It all started with the podcast, Shark Farmer podcast.
Rob Sharkey, the shark farmer, discusses how his life changed once his podcast started getting noticed.
We started that, and it snowballed. It was crazy. And podcasts were new, and we hit the timing right, and we were talking about things that nobody else was talking about in agriculture.
Podcasters and other new media ag stars were featured last February at the Virginia Farm Bureau Young Farmers Conference held at the Berry Hill Estate in Halifax County. 25 years ago, an online blog meant anyone with an internet connection could become a publisher. Today, anyone with a smartphone can be a podcaster. Podcasts have given many people whose voices hadn't been heard a chance to speak and build an audience. That's worked out for Sharkey. He was interviewed recently by Morgan Slavin and Ashley KUHLER, hosts of Virginia's Young Farmers podcast.
Your ag journey has been a lot of learning from failures. And that's something that we talk a lot about with young farmers in this programming. And we hope that they can hear some of those failures and maybe even resonate with them a little bit or learn from it too. So do you mind letting us know, like, what was one of those failures that you really learned from, or one that just really stuck with you?
Well, you know, the whole main message of the speech that we give around the country generally is the failure that when we tried to get into hogs when we first got married, it took me to the verge of bankruptcy, and then how that we came out of that. A lot of mistakes. Basically, you could talk about I should have filed for bankruptcy and just restarted, but we decided not to. You know, I make more mistakes than I make good decisions, and that's fine. I mean, they don't define you, and if you can just kind of learn from those. And I look back on some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life. Honestly, it's gotten me to where I am now.
In agriculture, podcasts have the ability to reach farmers as they farm. Whether it's riding a combine or working with animals, a podcast host can be like a friend riding along while at work. Not all podcasts are for entertainment. Elijah Griles with the Virginia Farm Bureau hosts the Cattle Pulse podcast.
How do we provide economic information as well as marketing outlooks for cattle producers here in Virginia? And Cattle Pulse is really focused on kind of that dual mission of how do we both look at the national economic trends that affect cattle marketing and then relate that back to our local auctions here in Virginia.
Podcasts aren't the only non-traditional media that have found an agriculture audience. Robert Harper has produced the Virginia Farm Bureau's Merchandiser Minute video since 2016. In a video message that lasts about 10 minutes each Friday, he gives insight into farm markets and agribusiness trends. It's not just farm operators who listen. Educators from Virginia Tech to public school teachers use the video in class.
When the bell closes in Chicago at 2:15, I start to take all that content and try to squeeze it down to what is going to give someone who's listening to this a snapshot about what happened this week on the Chicago Board of Trade, and then what is going to happen next week, some outlook items, and then take those and say, hey, here's the Virginia-centric part of it.
Podcasts started to gain popularity in 2004 as sales of Apple's iPod took off, and today there's approximately 5 million podcasts. One skill successful podcasters share is the ability to open their lives to their audience.
Resonates with me. I got divorced in the past year, and so my farming operation, I'm starting back over from scratch again, and that is actually what somebody told me the other day, is that those things don't define you. They help shape you into who you are really supposed to be and you're destined to become.
And, you know, I can tell you're going to be successful just because, you know, not all people would admit, you know, I'm going through a divorce. They would just keep that to themselves because, I don't know, does that make me look bad or whatever? But the fact that you openly talk about it, I don't know, it shows me that you're going to embrace the lessons from that.
In addition to the Virginia Young Farmers podcast, the Shark podcast, Cattle Pulse, and the Merchandiser Minute, there are dozens of other farm and rural podcasts and other new media outlets on the internet, all adding their voices to the agriculture community. In Halifax County, Virginia, I'm Burke MOELLER reporting.